Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Algae Inc. Now in this game you take on the role of a supervisor of a team of operators, scientists, and engineers working for the company Algae Inc. Now all the players work for the same larger company, but each one works in a different division, and after the 4 weeks the company will decide what the best division is. Now the game revolves around your player board. Each player has an asymmetrical one depending on which of the departments you decide to manage, either fuel, food, cosmetics, or plastics. But they all kind of work towards the same goal, moving your algae along your conveyor belts to be processed into refined goods. And once you have those refined goods, you want to export them to the different cities on the board to fulfill their needs, and they all have kind of a minimum requirements that they want. Each day, you're going to select the action based on where your supervisor currently is. Each action spot is connected to only 2 other action spots. At the end of the week, you could get a bonus depending on the various factors you've done throughout the week. Now, Algae Inc. is definitely on the heavier side of Euros, with a lot you want to do, but you've only got 20 turns to take all your actions. This is the type of tight game that always appeals to me, and layer on that different play styles for the 4 different departments to master makes this one I knew I wanted to get to the table. So, will this game be like some perfect piece of biofueled food, or should it just be left in the vats? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and I'll come back with my final thoughts on Algae Inc. So here's Algae set up. There's no way I can cover this entire game in this overview, so I'm going to be skipping a lot of the small details to concentrate on the overall flow and concepts of the game. Each player has a unique board, a sideboard, and tiles unique to their department. You're either going to be cosmetics, biofuel, goods, or bioplastics, all working under the larger corporation. I've set up bioplastics for this overview. All the science tiles are placed face up on their spots, both on the department board and on the engineering board. Luckily, each player also gets their own reference guide for their department that shows where everything goes. You start with the basic operators and 2 algae cubes placed in your available storage slot. Science markers start at 0, and your export and multiplier tokens go on their spots. Shuffle your contract cards and draw 3. Of these, you're going to be using the middle of one card, the top of a second, and the bottom of a third. Slide them underneath your sideboard. Now all of these cards are split into 3 sections: an end of the month scoring, a special one-time contract, and a permanent ability. You'll place them so that only one section of each card is visible. On the main board, randomly place the regular demand tokens on the cities without the pre-printed demands on them. Place 24 random city bonus tiles on the cities. For each player, place out 2 random city bonus tiles and 1 random staff tiles. Randomly place milestones based on their colors, and make a supply of the other components. Mark the algae capacity in each vat, and place that many cubes in each vat, and the remainder just go in the general pool. Each player's energy marker starts in the middle. On the action board, randomly place the 3 weekly bonuses on the first 3 weeks. Randomly place an A action strip on the first day. For all the others, randomly choose an appropriate action strip, B through E. For these, make sure that they are with a single dot up. Randomly select a weekend bonus and an endgame VP strip. The week marker starts on week 1. Each player places their supervisor on the starting space. Now the idea of the game is to convert your algae into products using your conveyor belts, and finally sell them to the markets. Each market has a demand on it, and that's the value of goods that you must sell to them in the single action. The algae is stored in your open storage tanks. At the start of the game, you only have access to 1 open storage tank, and you cannot take algae from the supply if you can't store it. In your factory, you have a series of conveyor belts. The yellow ones are the main ones, and the green ones are called secondary conveyor belts. When you activate a machine through the action board, you'll move cubes from that machine to the next one. So, activating machine A will move cubes from your storage to the first station. Machine C will move the algae into the final product stages. Secondary belts will only activate when you activate the machine in the zone that they're in. They can cause you to lose algae cubes, lose energy, gain byproduct cubes, or gain energy. Losses incurred are mandatory, but gaining is optional. If you gain, lose, or spend energy, you move your energy cube in the proper direction. If you need to spend or lose energy and you're at the bottom, you must spend 2 euros per missing energy. If you're at the top and gain more energy, you get a point. Your sideboard has your tokens you'll be placed when you do exports to a location on the board. You'll be placed in your export discs and milestone discs, which will increase your income. However, if you use a 2x tile for additional actions, they are removed from the game and you lose additional income, because you're going to be covering up that row. Your science tiles begin on your department board. When they are removed by activating your scientist, you're going to reveal upgrades on that board. They are then placed face down in the science grid of your science board. If you cover up a bonus on that grid, you're going to receive that. Your engineering tiles begin in your science grid. When you activate your engineers, they are removed and placed face up in your department board, where they improve the production and free up space to add more spaces in your science grid. The combo tiles are also in your science grid. When you remove them with your engineers, you flip them over to their science side and place them beside your board. You can then add them back later using your scientists. The basic resources in the game are the Euro, freelance engineers, market values, and science points. Whenever you gain or spend science points, you move your appropriate marker. Whenever you receive a city bonus, flip it and take the appropriate resource. You can, if you need to, exchange resources for another at a ratio of 2 to 1. Similarly, you can exchange 3 resources if you want a wild action token, and I'll talk about what those wild actions are later. The last concept to go into before I talk about the actual actions are the export and market value. When your algae has made it to the finished goods storage, it'll be worth a certain amount of market value. These goods are available to be exported. Next to each storage tank is the market value of each good. This can be per good, or it could be for several goods. When you perform the export action to a city, the city will show you the value of the goods that you must export to it. And you can augment your finished goods value with as many market tokens as you wish. When you export to a city, the value of the goods plus the market value tokens must be equal to or greater than the demand token on that city. So let's get into the main gameplay. I'm going to keep this again at a high level. The game is played over 4 weeks, and each week has 5 days. Each day you're going to move your supervisor up on the track to a connected action and perform that action. At the end of the week, if your energy is high enough, you can get 1 or 2 bonuses. In the final week, you'll score, again depending on your energy level, none, 1, or 2 of the spots that your supervisor ended up at. So each week functions the same, and you'll run through the path that's listed on your player board. Monday morning, you'll receive income and VP based on your sideboard. You always start with 2 income and no points, but as you start to remove tokens, those will increase. For each algae operator that you have, you'll receive 1 algae cube from the appropriate vat. You can only take algae that you can store, and this is done in player order. If the algae tank is empty, you can buy generic algae from the general pool. Next, for each engineer that you have, you can move 1 algae cube along the main conveyor belt. Those are going to be the yellow conveyor belts. During this stage, you cannot activate any green secondary belts. Finally, you receive 1 science point for each scientist. Now all of these can be upgraded because they are science tiles, but that's the basic ones. Once you receive income, the heart of the game happens. On your turn, you're going to move your supervisor to a connected space and take that action. If you have a wild token, you can take any action you want. And there are 3 kind of main action groups, either recruiting a staff member, activating a team, or activating one of your machines. When recruiting a staff member, pay the price above the leftmost empty spot for that staff and receive the bonus that you cover up. When you activate a team, you're going to do their action. The operators and scientists have 2 options, but you'll only be able to do 1 of them for your action. When you activate operators, you can get more algae cubes using the same method as the Monday morning meetings. Now, instead of getting more algae into your tanks, you can export your finished goods. Since you all work for the same company, you are allowed to export to cities for free if any other player has already delivered there. If you want to export to a new city, you must pay the connection cost based on how many steps, up to a maximum of 3, it is away from a city with any player's disc in it. The only exception is the first delivery of the game. For this setup, it must be to Berlin, and there's no transportation costs. Now, assuming you have enough market value to meet the demand of the city, as I mentioned earlier, place your topmost export disk and place it on that city. If there's a bonus there, you take it and receive the depicted resource. If you have achieved one of the milestones, place your milestone marker on the appropriate spot. Now you can only have 1 milestone marker in each row. You can do as many exports as you have operators, but after each export, the exported algae cubes go back into the general supply. If you are able to make an export during the first 3 weeks, you're going to receive that week's bonus. You do have an option, once per game, to make an export to your personal contract without paying any transportation costs. Just place your disk on there, get rid of your algae cubes, and receive its rewards. When you activate your engineers, each engineer generates 1 engineering point. You're going to spend these points to remove engineering tiles from your science grid and place them on your department board. The cost in engineering points is listed along the side of your sideboard. You can also remove the combo tiles from the science grid by the same point spending and flip them over and place them beside your board. You can remove as many tiles as you have engineers as long as you have the engineering points. With scientists, you can either gain science points or place science tiles. To receive points, For each scientist you have, gain 1 science point. Now instead, you can spend your science points to place science tiles. You spend your points to either remove a science tile from your department board, flipping it over, then paying the science point in the section that you wish to place it and receive any bonus you cover. Or you can place a flip combo tile from beside your board that you removed previously in the same manner by paying the science costs. If you remove a science tile from one of your storage tanks, increase the capacity of that algae storage tank on the main board. There is also an activate any team action that allows you to activate any single team. When you activate one of your machines, you're going to move algae cubes along that machine up to its capacity. The maximum capacity only applies to the main conveyor belts. When you activate a machine, all conveyor belts may be active in that machine. There are several types of secondary conveyor belts, and they all have rules on how they're activated. Now, one machine that is different is the A machine. When activating to move algae from the tanks to the first step, you will often have a byproduct by losing one or more algae cubes along the secondary conveyor belt. When you produce byproduct, which can be used as an additive by other players' machines if they have that byproduct conveyor, but when you produce byproducts, you have 2 options. You can either burn it by returning it to the general supply and moving your energy cube up 1 step per algae cube burnt, or you can store it as byproduct in the appropriate tank that matches the algae that it's a byproduct of. You'll receive money based on where you place it in the tank. Likewise, when you add a byproduct to your product run, it will come from the appropriate byproduct tank. Machines B and C do not have this byproduct production, but they do have the byproduct usage. And at the end of machine C, you're going to have finished goods. Now, choice tokens can be used when activating a team or a machine to change which team or machine you activate. A wild token allows you to take any action, regardless of where your supervisor currently is. If you have an empty row on your sideboard by placing an export disk and a milestone marker, you have the option to cover it up with a 2x tile. This allows you to redo the action where your supervisor is standing. The section action can be modified with a choice or wild token. Once all players have reached Friday, you can potentially get a bonus depending on which spot you're in. If your energy marker is in the red section, you get no bonus. In the yellow section, you can pick which one of the 2 bonuses you want, and if you're in green, you get both bonuses. Once the week is over, advance the round marker, flip over the lowest unflipped day tile, refill the algae tanks up to capacity, and balance the byproduct tanks. If there's more than 2 empty levels between the 2 tanks, move product from one to the other until there's no more than 1 empty row between them. First player token then moves to the next player. At the end of the month, you're going to skip the Friday bonuses and instead score the milestone bonuses. This is again based on where your supervisor ended up and your energy position. You could potentially score none, 1, or 2 of these bonuses the same way that you got the Friday bonuses. Finally, you score 1 VP for each uncovered VP token on your board. On your science board, you scored 1 VP for each tile in your largest orthogonally adjacent science tiles that you placed in your science grid. Score your ending contract from your card, and resources, algae cubes, science points, and whatever else you have left over are converted at a 4-to-1 point ratio. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Algae Inc. Let's jump into the theme and components. The theme in this one I found interesting and does mesh reasonably well with the mechanisms. You're using your machines and conveyor belts to move your product along, and your scientists and engineers of making that process more efficient, while your operators either collecting the raw materials or exporting the final product to the different cities. Now, I just tend to really like the theme in this one. For the components, I like them. I really appreciate that each player gets their own book of kind of how to set it up and what all their conveyor belts do. This makes teaching significantly easier. A lot of the other pieces are spelled out on the boards, like the week from Monday morning to Friday, go through on the bottom of your board. And for the player boards that do have extra steps, like the food spoiling if it's kept too long, is also noted on the player board. The other components are nice as well. Nothing spectacular, but a really good solid component. The rulebook does a good job of explaining the rules, and what is not covered by the rulebook is going to be covered by the specific player's rulebook here. And again, this will cover anything that's specific to that player's asymmetrical board. Now on to the gameplay. This is a bear to teach, but when you get over that initial rule set, I found that it just kind of made sense. You only have a limited pool of actions to take, and they really just break down to either getting a new team member, activating a department, or running a machine. Now within those, you do have options, not in terms of the different actions, but what you want to do with those actions. If you activate your engineers or scientists, which part of the machine do you want to make better? Opening up more vats is always useful and gives you kind of more options when taking algae, but it opens up to a little more competition for the other players. But increasing your maybe machine's capacity means you can process more algae, and that's very useful as well. So which path do you want to take? So although yes, when you choose to activate your engineers, you're only maybe spending your engineering points, but the implications of what you've done kind of ripples through the next actions that you want to be able to take. So I'm not choosing from a huge list of action options, but even that is reduced further by the path your supervisor's on. And making sure you're fully utilizing the actions is one of the keys to make sure you do well in this game. Now, speaking of the supervisor, the path that they're on will dictate what you're going to be doing through the entire week. So planning out what those week's goals are kind of will set your supervisor down a path. Yes, you can pivot to some degree, and having those wilder choice tokens is definitely an advantage. But you never want to be stuck where you can't use one of your available actions because, again, you only have 20 for the game. Now, I really like that there are many alternate ways to set up the game. The milestones are varied. Each player can have a different science grid, which I didn't show in the overview. The 3 cards you draw and how you place them into your board can change. You can change the market demand for the largest cities and maybe not have the first delivery in Berlin. These are going to change how you approach certain things, but are easily incorporated into the gameplay and aren't, vastly different. Even during the game with updated weekly change, that is, at the end of each week, the lowest one that hasn't been flipped over is going to flip over. This means that the exact path you took with the supervisor one week is not going to be available on the next week. And although there is very little player interaction, there's a lot of trying to beat your opponents to the same scoring opportunities, especially those milestones. And to that end, I really like that you can piggyback on the export discs already on the map. They don't need to be your own. Doing this strategically early on can save you coins to maybe make that surprise long distance delivery later on in the game with the coins you've saved early on just to get, be the first one to a milestone. Now, the game is all not sunshine and roses, and I'm not sure the departments are all well balanced. Some feel a little easier to play than others. Some of them are very energy dependent, and you can miss out on in-game bonuses and end-of-game scoring because your machine is so energy hungry. Understanding that and working within those limits makes it, I find, slightly harder to play, but still enjoyable. And if you're playing the food and get that card that avoids food spoilage, makes that one a little easier to play. I was also not a big fan of those weekly bonuses you get for making a delivery. They can be pretty powerful, and missing out on them can be to your detriment. But that does mean, for all the choices I've talked about that I've mentioned previously, the bonus kind of forces you down one path each week. And to be fair, most players will be doing the same thing, so the bonuses don't basically reside with one player, and you want to make sure that you are at least get some of the bonuses. You don't need all of them, maybe, but you do need most of them. They're not strictly mandatory to do, but it does feel awfully close to that. I wish there were other ways to get those bonuses, and if you missed it one week, that there's a way on a later week to kind of get it again. So would I recommend this game? Definitely. It's been a highlight for me and will probably end up my top 100 games the next time I do my list. Now, for me, I just really like the theme in this one, and it made sense for the most part. I love the flow of the game and how you have to be thinking of several things at once. Moving your algae along won't really help you if you're not set up to make a delivery, and making multiple deliveries in a single action is good as long as you have enough operators. The interconnected gears really worked for me on this one. I like the graphic design. It makes it easier to teach. Not sure what your secondary conveyor belts? Look at your player guide. How much does LG cost if the tank is empty? Well, it's right there on the board. I like that this is a good crunchy euro, but doesn't outstay its welcome. You only get 20 supervisor moves for the entire game, and that lasts around 2 hours, which I feel is a good length. I've played this at all player counts as well and find it works at all of them. Now, I am not sure about the balance of the game. Some combos do feel easier than others and can feel a little jarring to see your opponent get an advantage right off at the beginning of the game just because of a random card pull. I also didn't like that for as open as this game feels, there do seem to be some actions you must take, like making a delivery each of those first 3 weeks to get those bonuses. To be fair, that's going to be part of the game, making deliveries, so it's not a completely unexpected thing to be doing. It just feels a little, you must do this on this week's to get that bonus. Overall though, I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10 and the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. I know this game is not going to be for everyone, but if you like Euro games on the heavier side and aren't put off by a lot of upfront rules, you should definitely check this one out. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.